I'm Catherine. Standing in front of the closed Open Hands Café, I'm flooded with memories. The sign on the wall, "You never know whose life you're touching," seems to glow with a deeper meaning now. It all started with a near-death experience that changed my life forever. That fateful morning, as I turned the corner towards the old cafe where I used to work, I was met with a scene of chaos. Red and blue lights flashed against the snow-covered buildings. Police vehicles lined the street, their engines idling. Yellow tape stretched across the sidewalk, and a fire truck was parked near the entrance, its lights spinning silently. I stopped in my tracks, my mind refusing to make sense of what I was seeing. An officer held up a hand to stop me. "You can't come through here," he said. I managed to stutter, "I work here." "What happened?" A detective stepped closer. "Are you Catherine?" he asked. I nodded, my chest tight with fear. He finally told me that there was an active explosive device planted under the front threshold of the cafe. It would have detonated when the door was opened. I was told it was disarmed at 5:58, just 2 minutes before I usually opened the door. If I had been on time, I would have been standing directly over it. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Fear and relief washed over me in waves, leaving me shaking. I whispered to myself, I was late. The detective nodded and said that delay had saved my life. As I sat in the back of a patrol car, wrapped in a blanket, I couldn't help but think about the man who had warned me, Mr. Thompson. He was a homeless man I had met behind the cafe. He always stood there, near the dumpsters, quiet and watchful. I remembered the first time I saw him. I was wiping down the counter when I noticed him through the back window. He wasn't rummaging through the trash like some others. He just stood there, hands tucked into his worn-out army coat. I started bringing him food when no one was looking. It was just small things, leftover soup, bread, or a piece of cracked pie that wouldn't be sold. He never complained, never asked for more. Our conversations were brief, just a greeting or a question about the weather. One morning, as I handed him a container of oatmeal and a roll, I blurted out, "My mom's sick. She had a stroke." He just nodded and said, "That's a heavy thing to carry." Then, the night before the explosion, he stopped me in the alley. "Tomorrow morning, you can't be the one who opens the cafe," he said seriously. I was confused and scared. I told him that if I was late, my boss, Mr. Harris, would be furious. He might fire me. But Mr. Thompson just said, "I know what it could cost you, but please trust me." I was hesitant. Opening the cafe at 6 o'clock sharp every morning was more than a job requirement, it was the anchor of my day. But there was something about the way he stood there, so steady and resolute, that made me believe him. I finally agreed to be late. I went back to my small apartment. I lived with my mother, who had been a strong and independent woman before her stroke. Now, she needed my help with almost everything. I checked on her first. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I adjusted her blanket and set out her morning medication. I thought about Mr. Harris, my boss. He was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, with a permanent flush on his face. He always arrived unannounced, scanning the room for faults. If the coffee was too hot or too cold, it was my fault. My paycheck was always late, and when I asked him about it, he would just wave me off, saying, "Next week, cash flow's tight." I also remembered the strange things I had noticed lately. Mr. Harris started coming to the cafe late at night. One time, I went back to get my scarf and found the lights on in the back. When I asked him what he was doing, he just said, "Inventory. Mind your business." And there were these men who came in through the back door. They never ordered food, never spoke to the staff. They just went straight to the storage area and left. One afternoon, while restocking flour in the storage room beneath the cafe, I tripped over a pallet. Behind it, I saw large blue sacks tightly tied. I pressed my hand against one, and whatever was inside shifted, heavy and granular. I quickly stepped back, thinking it wasn't my business. But later that day, when I came up from the stairs, I nearly collided with Mr. Harris. He looked at me sharply and asked what I was doing down there. I told him I was getting flour, and he just stared at me for a moment before stepping aside. After that, his eyes followed me more closely. I felt that something wasn't right, but I pushed the feeling aside. I had a mother to care for and bills to pay. I couldn't afford to lose my job. As I sat in the patrol car that morning, I learned that the cafe was not just a cafe. It was a drop point for a large-scale drug trafficking operation. The blue sacks I had seen contained narcotics. Mr. Harris was arrested for drug trafficking, conspiracy, and attempted murder. I was escorted to the police station to give my statement. I told them everything, my schedule, Mr. Harris's behavior, the men entering through the back door, and the blue sacks. When they asked about Mr. Thompson, my voice faltered. I explained how he had warned me and how he had refused to explain, only asking me to trust him. The detective said that without his warning, I would have been killed. I was also told that I was eligible for victim compensation, which included medical expenses for my mother, lost wages, and counseling. This was a huge relief. For the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of hope. But Mr. Thompson was nowhere to be found. I searched everywhere, behind the cafe, in the surrounding blocks, doorways, and underpasses. People either shook their heads or gave me vague directions. By the third day, I was discouraged. I knew he had disappeared deliberately. On the fourth evening, I found him in a small city park. He looked thinner and more hunched than I remembered. When I approached him, he said, "You shouldn't be looking for me." I replied, "You saved my life." I wasn't going to stop. He told me his story. He had been a combat engineer in the army. When he returned home, his life fell apart. His marriage ended, his son stopped talking to him, and he started drinking. One bad decision after another led him to the streets. When he saw the men at the cafe, he recognized the signs of an explosive device being planted. He couldn't just walk away. He said he had walked away from difficult situations before, and it had cost him too much. I told him about Mr. Harris's arrest and the charges. He was afraid of dealing with the authorities. He said he didn't trust the system anymore. But I convinced him to let me help. I went back to the police and told them everything he had shared with me. The investigation moved faster after that. The police confirmed his service record, his training, and his honorable discharge. They offered him options like veteran rehabilitation, transitional housing, and counseling. He was wary at first, but I stood by him through it all. He finally agreed to enter the Veterans Rehabilitation Program. The day he left, he shook my hand and gave me a brief, awkward embrace. He said, "I didn't save you to be thanked. I did it because it was right." With the compensation money, I was able to stabilize my mother's care. I arranged for consistent physical therapy and secured her medications months in advance. My mother noticed the change in me. She said I was standing straighter, like I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen anymore. I also fulfilled my long-held dream of opening my own cafe. I found a small corner space for rent in a working-class neighborhood. I called it Open Hands Café. Mr. Thompson helped me when he could. He fixed loose wiring, reinforced the back door, and gave me security advice. I painted the walls myself, choosing warm, neutral colors. I bought second-hand tables and sanded them smooth. The menu was simple: soup, bread, breakfast plates, and strong coffee. I met Daniel, a local produce supplier. He brought me fresh apples and leafy greens at fair prices. Our relationship grew naturally, based on shared work and mutual respect. The cafe found its rhythm. I hired a part-time employee, and Mr. Thompson took on a small paid role checking systems and training staff on emergency awareness. One evening, as the cafe closed, I placed a small sign near the register that read, "Kindness changes more than we can see." Customers noticed it, and some asked about it. I never fully explained it because I didn't need to. Daniel and I got married in the Open Hands Café. It was a simple ceremony, with our neighbors and regulars as witnesses. Mr. Thompson sat in the front row, wearing his restored veteran uniform. He stood up and spoke. He said that he used to think kindness was a weakness, but I had shown him that it could save lives. Looking back, I realized that kindness truly does break the pattern of evil. It doesn't need to be loud or heroic. It just needs to be real. And I know that every day, someone walks into the Open Hands Café carrying their own burdens, and we do our best to interrupt those burdens with a little bit of kindness.